Good evening, Littleton, and welcome to the September 26, 2023 Select Board, FINCOM, CPC, and CONSCOM meeting this evening. A lot of committees, but a very short agenda this evening. Tonight we'll be going over organization. We'll do the pledge in a minute. Licensing for Stevie's Eatery for a one-day liquor license. We are going to finalize our warrant and direct posting, and we will adopt article recommendations for the November 21st special town meeting. Mr. Clerk, if we could start the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let's kick things off. Ryan, I believe our first, we don't have an email or anything for this one, so let's talk one-day liquor license.
One-day liquor license for October 7th, 2023 for Stevie's Eatery.
All right. Good evening.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm here for a liquor license for a wedding. The wedding will be held at 1 Monarch Drive, at my location. It's nothing fancy, from 4:30 to 9:30. I believe that's the time frame.
Yep.
That's it. Simple.
All right. Any comments, questions? Okay. All right. Look for motion.
Move the Select Board vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 14, to issue a special license, also known as a one-day liquor license, to Stephen Dembro of Stevie's Eatery, LLC, for wine and malt beverages to be served on Saturday, October 7th, 2023, between the hours of 4:30 and 9:30 p.m.
Second. That's correct.
Okay, it's been moved by Mark, seconded by Chuck. All those in favor say aye.
I have to do
aye.
a roll call.
Oh, because Karen needs it, but
Excuse me. I forgot I have a member that's not present.
Please.
We're going to do a roll call vote. Matthew.
Matthews, yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Chuck.
Chuck goes yes.
Karen. I don't. You appear to be muted.
Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Can you hear me? All right, give me a thumbs.
Yes.
Thank you.
For the record, there was a thumbs up.
And I'm a yes. All right, approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we get down to the business of November 1st special town meeting. So we're finalizing the insertion of articles onto the warrant.
Correct. So, Mr. Chair, if I may, so our two goals today are to finalize the warrant, direct posting. There are multiple locations that we have to actually post the documents. So I've got some items. I have the signature pages here ready for your signature. And of course, finalize the adoption of article recommendations for these special town meetings. So I believe there are, 6 articles that we'll be reviewing tonight that still remain outstanding. So with that said, if you'd be willing, Mr. Chair, I can move on and we can start getting into those articles. Some of them are relatively quick.
Sure.
Okay. So let's see here. Thank you. Steve, would you like to take that?
Thank you, sir.
All right. On behalf of the happy bride and bride. So
I will.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are going to, just as a reminder about what our schedule is, we're meeting this evening, and hopefully we'll have final recommendations on all of the articles that are relevant for specifically the Finance Committee and Select Board. Our objective is to then finalize the warrant, the posting. That's one document. The town report is a separate document that will be scheduled to go to the printer by close of business on Thursday. And then the objective would be that the town meeting report be delivered to the post office for delivery to all the residents in town on Friday, October 13th. Most of the time it comes in either, it'll be sent out either on Friday or that weekend. And then, of course, we have our special town meeting, which is Wednesday, November 1st, 2023. So this is one of the last steps within that process. And again, we are close. Our remaining items that we have here for our review. First is the addition of the acceptance of a report. The Master Plan Implementation Committee is asked to address town meeting and give an update. I believe that update was provided to the board back in the spring, rather informative, and kind of gives an overview of all things going on in town. So I think that was the request of a select board member, Karen Morrison, and the moderator has been discussed this with the town moderator, and they're willing to do this. Next article is to rescind unused borrowing authorizations. We discussed this with you before, but now we have the final numbers and the years in which those initial authorizations were put forward, so we've got the backup information on that. Amendment to the FY24 CPA budget, which includes some recent changes to that article, which we'll go over. Article 12 is the Parks and Recreation Community Education revolving funds. We're proposing to increase that from 1.1 million to 1.3 million. Article 16 is to amend the general bylaws. We have a mix of different articles there that we're looking to either eliminate or revise. Article 17 is rescinding state statute. That is specifically as it relates to the waiver of pay, I believe. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but this is the article that we typically vote to make appointments to such positions as the waiver of bar pay and I think there's fence viewer, things like that. We're trying to find ways to streamline town meetings so people don't have to vote and make those appointments. And the idea is that by taking these votes, the special, we won't have to take them at the end.
Sure.
And then the last piece is the purchase of the Webster property, which there's been a lot of discussion on. So with that said, first piece is to see if we can get a recommendation from the board regarding the acceptance of town reports. In this case, as I said before, we're looking to accept the report of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, who's expressed an interest in wanting to address town meeting.
Okay, I want to just make sure, since this was Karen, wanted to put this on the, I want to make sure you can hear us fine. We want to say something? Because I haven't been able to hear you. You don't want to say anything? Okay, but you can hear us. Okay, all right.
So for the purposes of this article, I think I'd look for a select board recommendation, but I don't think the finance committee needs to make any recommendation on this because it's not any,
Yep.
I mean, that's up to you, Steve.
I think she is trying to say something. I don't know whether the connection is messed up or what, but I don't know.
I think we'll let Mark work on it for a minute.
I don't suppose you can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we can,
Yes.
yep, okay.
All right.
All right. That's good news.
Yeah. So if anybody wants a little background, the Master Plan Implementation Committee was interested in presenting their review of the current status of the master plan and implementation thereof. So this should just be an informational presentation, brief, and just something that will help refamiliarize those in attendance with what the master plan is and where we are on it.
Great. All right.
I worked with Laura on her report. It was incredibly comprehensive and long. I'm sure she'll be able to distill it, but the amount of information in there was very significant. So I'm glad that I would obviously recommend we endorse this.
Yeah, and I think it's being put into, the town moderator said, you've
Yes,
got
my
10
town
minutes.
moderator said, yes.
10 minutes, right? So
Yeah,
it's
10-minute limit, just like any.
it'll be quite the
presentation.
overview from, but it's important. So. Any other questions or comments? All right.
I just, is the vote to hear the best wording we can come up with? Because people aren't going to vote to hear it until after they've heard it.
We'll work with town council on that. Okay. So, can I get a recommendation from the board?
I'll recommend the select board, what do you?
Make a motion to recommend.
You make a motion to recommend Article 1.
Second.
Moved by Mark, seconded by Matthew. All those in favor, say
I'll really
aye.
do roll call
Roll call.
again, so, yeah.
Come on.
You're going to have to remind me every article.
Okay.
Matthew,
Matthew is yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chuck.
This is just an update, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see.
just to accept the report, that's a formality.
Fair enough. Yes. Chuck DeCosta's yes. I just don't see what is a need for a recommendation.
Karen?
It's a report.
Karen Morrison, yes?
And I am a yes. Thank you. Next, please.
Okay, the next article is a request to rescind remaining amounts that has been extended by the town. The three articles that we'd be referring to is May 4th, 2015, Special Town Meeting Article 7 for roadway improvements. The town did not use any of that, so we'd be looking to rescind the entire $1 million. Next piece is a special town meeting from October 28, 2019, for the library construction. That was originally for $3.1 million, and we have about $8,099.94 to be exact that we are seeking to rescind on that. So we, well, that was the original authorization, correct? Yes, right. And finally, from October 18th, 2022, special town meeting, Article 15, for the ambulance purchase, town authorized $225,000. As I understand, the timing changed a little bit, and we found other ways to fund this ambulance. So as such, we are asking that the entire amount be rescinded, the $225,000 for this special town meeting.
If I may, Ryan, just a little bit more research we did on the 225. It was actually to fund a third ambulance, and we never purchased a third ambulance.
Oh, okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Are we using any of this to purchase, to replace the existing ambulance? No. Right.
So
We will get asked on roadway improvements. That's a big $1 million. What's the story behind that? Steve's probably going to have to speak to it. Someone is going to bring that up.
Yeah, this is back from 2015, so we certainly can get.
Oh, never mind. Okay. Okay.
I can tell you what it
Sure.
was. I was around. Jimmy Clyde, the way he did road work was different than when Chris Stoddard came. We used to just tar and replace and dig it up and redo it. Chris came in and started to do patching. So there was no need to actually do $1 million worth of roadway work.
So just because it's going to come up, also, we're going to have to be prepared to speak to why we're rescinding the 225 for the ambulance in one article and asking for 250 in the next. So, and why we don't just ask for 25 and combine the two.
We don't want to borrow.
You have in that scenario, you'd have to borrow. Right.
Right, we're not proposing a borrowing.
Okay.
Article 6.
Any other questions?
Move the select board to recommend Article 5.
Second?
Roll call vote. Matthew?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chuck? Karen?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. We will need a FINCOM recommendation.
And Finance Committee, do we have a motion?
I move the Finance Committee to support so recommend Article 5.
Second?
Moved and second. All in favor?
No, you don't.
No, you don't, yeah, everybody, all the finance committee members are here, so.
I'm going to, the rest of the financial articles, I'd like the finance committee to vote first.
Okay, that makes sense?
They're making a recommendation to us, so I want
Makes
to
good
make sure that
sense.
we're not.
Okay.
We're taking their recommendation seriously. So you took it. If you said no,
All right.
we'd probably have to have a discussion. So thank you.
That's good, okay. Moving along, Article 10 is the Community Preservation Committee. So this looks, I think the reason we had held off I had asked for is to hold off, was this, I think we were, Alicia couldn't make the last meeting, and we were waiting for an update on the lighting at, I always mispronounce corporate, thank you, corporate field, thank you. But since that point, and Alicia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the PRCE is withdrawing that request. So what you have in front of you is essentially three things. One is $50,000 for window painting and rehabilitation of windows at the Houghton Memorial Building, $8,000 from the Historic Resources Reserve for preservation of town records. This is a request made to the CPC from the town clerk. And finally, $734,000 for construction of tennis courts at Littleton High School. So basically, I think all of these articles, both the Select Board and Finance Committee had discussed at your last meeting, and I believe that you were supporting this. So really, all this is with the red line, it's just showing what the change is, and such as that, the request is basically asking you to move forward with what you basically already agreed to.
Okay, I think the only discussion we needed to have on this before we voted would have been the corporate field. Did you have anything to add, Alicia? No, everything's good. Right. Any comments, Finance Committee, on
discussion?
I
CPC?
guess, I know I missed the last meeting. Did the schools ever take a position on this in support of the tennis courts?
They are in support.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the affirmative.
Do you have a motion?
I move that the Finance Committee supports, or recommends, Article 10, for the special town meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Unanimous there, the full motion.
Move the Select Board recommend Article 10.
Second?
Moved by Mark, seconded by Matthew. Roll call vote. Matthew?
Hughes, yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chuck?
I think yes.
Karen?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Right, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay. Next item is a request from the Parks and Recreation Commission to increase the revolving fund limit from 1.1 million to 1.3 million. So we could have Alicia provide an update in terms of what they're looking to do there.
Yeah, so good evening, committee and board members. So thank you. I apologize for the last meeting. I was in urgent care, so I could not attend, so I do apologize. So this article is just really a house cleaning article. So when we decided to make the switch over to a revolving, we did have to come up with a number to have a cap for that revolving fund. I believe at the time Sean was still here. So the conversations that we had with Sean and Alicia were trying to figure out what made the most sense as far as what the cap should be. So I think at the time they both felt comfortable with the 1.1. When Finance Director Patty Moore was here, we had follow-up conversations, and she actually suggested that we increase it to 1.3. And essentially the reason for that being is that the registration numbers are increasing about 7% each year for our programs. A lot of our summer programs have been completely sold out. And we've even increased the number. So an example that I gave was for Camp Tehadawon. Typically in the past, we've only accepted 150 kids per week. We increased that to 180 and still sold out over the summer. In addition to that, we also, so with that comes, we need to increase the number of staff that we have, the number of supplies, the number of field trip tickets, the number of transportation, funding, all of those things increase over time. So the request for the 1.3 cap is not the intention to spend 1.3. It's so that we can make sure that we stay under that. We do not want to go over that, which is why we want to make sure that if we increase that a little bit, if we do have to spend a bit more, that we're able to, and we wouldn't necessarily get anywhere close to that cap. So, I mean, obviously, we would only be spending what we have in the revolving, so we would never go over what's in there. But it's more of just a safety measure, that's all.
I'm just curious, about what have you been running just this last year or so?
Yeah, so I would say we usually have around, it's like a 1 million that flows through. And when I say that, on average, our wage lines come around somewhere to $550,000 to almost $6,000 or $600,000. My apologies, for just staffing alone. So that's not including all of the expenditures that come along with the programs as well. So, so that's pretty average of where we're at.
So you're comfortable with the 1.3?
Yeah.
Good. Any other discussion?
Has the
Sure.
Partner Commission voted to recommend this as well?
Yes.
Can we put that?
We can.
All right.
Make a motion, we recommend articles.
Well, yeah.
Yep.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
For motion.
Move that the select board recommend Article 12.
Second.
Moved by Mark, seconded by Matthew. Roll call vote. Matthew?
Matthew, yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you,
much.
folks. Have a great night.
You
Appreciate
too.
it.
Okay, the next piece is sort of a multi-part set of recommendations. A lot of this stem from suggestions that were made by the town clerk to our office about things that we could clean up. There were some other elements that the board had requested, so Mr. Chair, if I could just go through those, and we can stop and we can go over what those changes are, so that's okay. So item number one is related to the appointment of the town administrator. So we are making a suggestion that the primary change is basically giving this phase 2 here, which basically says that in addition to the town administrative search committee, the select board may, by majority vote, waive the appointment of a TASC if it is in the best interest of the town to engage in an alternative method for recruitment, screening, or hiring process. So, so that's one new component, and I want to just show the changes here in green. So I think we're calling it the Town Administrator Selection Committee, was a slight tweak. And then I think we had the old title of that we're now updating to Select Board, which reflects your current piece. We also, Personnel Advisory Committee has changed, so small details here in green that just updates this particular component of town code to accurately reflect our current titles. And then, of course, item number 2, which is alternatively the select board may by majority vote waive the appointment of a TASC if it is in the best interest of the town to engage in an alternative method for recruitment, screening, or hiring process. So, any questions on that?
No, just commentary. I know this one we added. The last time this was updated was before we had an assistant town administrator, so we were operating under a town administrator system without an assistant. So this is really an update to that policy, giving flexibility on, obviously, if we have an assistant town administrator that's a viable option, they should be considered. It's really for efficiency. Right now, the select board and future select boards would have been handcuffed by the process that's currently in place. And by that, what I mean is we will basically have 9 months of an office that is not fully staffed because we've had to go through a certain process, the existing process that has been established for now a decade anyway, plus, which obviously hinders any type of efficiencies that this board is trying to accomplish and we're trying to get done with our goals, and the functioning of the town as a whole, I think, gets hindered for several months at a time. So I think this is going to help us in the future. And I know everybody had a little bit of commentary on this. I'm comfortable with this language. The only language I was tinkering with was probably the 4th, 5th vote versus a majority vote, but I'm comfortable with either way. I'll go with what the board.
I thought last meeting we said supermajority.
I believe that we did.
I wasn't sure, I think I'm unsure whether or not that.
I wasn't here, so.
My recollection is that we wanted it to be a supermajority.
And I think maybe too, but because Gary wasn't here too, I think we wanted to just,
That's fine.
so.
I think I raised that.
Yeah, so I guess.
So yes, 4/5.
Continue that debate.
Karen, did you have any commentary on this one?
No.
Thank you.
My only other question is on the Personnel Advisory Committee. We actually have a member of the Personnel Advisory Committee here now that is a town employee and also lives out of town. They should not be able to serve on this. I don't think, should they, or are we allowing them?
I'm sorry,
The exception, so the Human Resource Director is currently a member. We appointed her as a member of the PAC. It's not I don't believe it's a requirement, is it?
I'm not sure if I'm not
So
sure if I
she's,
understand
so
the
the
point.
current person on the Personnel Advisory Committee is
Right.
not a resident of Littleton. So if that board actually appointed a member to the Task C, we would have the out-of-town member.
Which we have in the past.
Have we?
Kelly Clenchey has served on a number of selection committees. including
Good,
the-
fair enough.
I think I recall asking Diane Crory, and I don't think there's a specific exception for people who live out of town.
Okay.
I'm not questioning one, I'm just asking if we want an exception or not.
Oh,
That's just it.
Whoever the sitting board is can actually accept or push back to any one of the committees that makes an
Well,
assignment for whatever cost.
Yeah, well, we shouldn't be pushing on the Personnel Advisory Committee on who they select, right? They should pick who they best think. We shouldn't be putting pressure on them. So just the question is, should the HR director be able to serve or not serve?
Or any.
I'm open to
employee.
commentary. I see both sides. I could see where you could put in an exemption.
It would seem to me that simple language that said somebody, either a resident of the town or somebody that's in the employ of the town, employee of the town, that would cover both sides, for somebody like Kelly or your HR director who happens not to live in town. They're employees of the town, therefore, that would be the exception. And then you could still maintain the residential, if you so choose. But I would think it'd be a simple language change.
But it's the appointment of that committee, so if they have, the police chief is on there, and he doesn't live in town.
Right.
Or the school superintendent, if they choose to.
I think we would leave this one alone because it's the only one that is like that, the Personal Advisory Committee, and that's where we have many other committees that, or boards that we have for selection committees and hiring committees that have members of the town, the populace that works in town, not live here, that are on those boards and committees. So I don't know why we would make this one specifically different.
I don't know that we have other boards other than the personnel that have out-of-town residents on them. They can vote.
Okay, all right, I guess where it isn't, I'll put it this way, where it isn't a selection committee, there's no mass general law that's going to cover it, where this is just it's a committee that's basically referring people to us, and then the selection committee, it would obviously have to be residents of Littleton. So I think there's a reason why the HR director is on that board. I think it's due to the knowledge and their exceptional skill in recruiting and looking for this position specifically, which would be a town administrator. So that's where I stand on it, but I don't want to be the one that dominates the time here.
I would go under E, where it says a member at large. It doesn't necessarily a resident at large. So I think that should be tweaked to say that it's a resident at large that has municipal experience. But I don't think we should narrow down the personnel advisory committee, because we might have somebody on the HR director, or it could be another member of staff that is sitting on that personnel advisory committee that is not a resident. To my earlier point, that, Kelly Punchy has sat on selection committees.
Well, he's not eligible for this committee as it's currently constituted. So,
Although he has been on.
Oh, he has been, in the past, he's been on the town administrative search committee. Sure. Yeah. I don't, how's the board feel? But let's just pull it.
I don't have any problem with allowing qualified personnel like HR directors to sit on a committee.
And that would be the only scenario here that it could be, because that's the only person. Everyone else has to be a resident of Littleton on the personnel advisory.
But even if we wanted to have the police chief or the fire chief on a committee, I would have no problem with them sitting on a committee. I assume they bring expertise that's relevant, so.
So you're in favor of leaving D and E as word?
Yes, that's
so
right.
that E doesn't have to be a resident. It could be.
I could go either way on
It could
that,
be
but-
Clinchy, for
Yeah.
example.
I'd be open.
I'm fine with. I just wanted to bring it up for discussion. So,
All right.
though I do think on 2, I would prefer it be a supermajority.
All right, so if you could please, are we in agreement on the supermajority? I think that's what we talked about originally, over a 3/5 vote. To any changes on the alternatively part, we would have to have a supermajority vote for that. Is that Karen? Is that?
I'm in agreement with that.
That would be the only change. So we do not need, this is not a financial article, so we will not need finance, FINCOM, so.
Okay, I'll make
For a motion as amended.
Well, that was my next question. Do we want to do these one by one, or do we want to do it all as Article 16?
That's up to the chair.
I think only if we were going to make a change, or we're going to pull something out or amend something, I don't think that are we making any amendments to this?
We just did.
Change it to supermajority.
I'm going to vote on this one, please, now.
Okay.
We can group the others, but anyone we do an amendment, I'd
So
rather.
I'll move that we recommend Article 16, Item 1 for the Town Administrator Selection Committee as amended.
Second.
Moved by Mark, seconded by Matthew. Roll call vote, Matthew?
Matthew, yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chuck?
Chuck goes to that.
Karen? Karen? Uh-oh. Can you hear us,
10 minutes
Karen?
are up.
Yeah, the free app.
Thumbs up.
Thank you.
All right, I think you can hear me now.
Yep, we got you. And I'm a yes. All right, next, please.
And then for the, well, I guess this really, this is primarily all select board recommendations. I don't think there's any finance committee pieces.
Okay, so this whole-
So we can keep going with that. Okay, so for items 2, 3, and 4, which are going to try to package these together in terms of old titles and trying to be able to move away from or eliminate these old titles. So item 2 is updates the title of Board of Park Commission to the Board of Park and Recreation Commissioners. Item 3 amends Section 8.8 language to combine the Board of Park Commission and Playground and Recreation Commission to Board of Parks and Recreation Commissioners, which again hopefully reflects that. And deletes and number 4 deletes the group Playground and Recreation Commission. So because right now there's a Board of Parks and Recreation Commissioners, which is what we've been doing. So Any questions on that?
No, that's some old language. I
It's some
remember.
old
I actually
language,
remember the
right?
playground.
We're trying, as I say, we're trying to clean up a lot of old stuff here, so we just have one, just have one group now. So.
Okay.
And the entirety of Article 4 is 5, it says it shall be a 5-member board. There's no other responsibilities, description, or anything else. So
Right.
it's not like we're getting rid of anything.
Correct. Okay. Let's see, so then we get to, let's see, then we're looking at committees, which is
Number
5. So this is the school planning committee. Apparently the school planning committee hasn't been active in a number of years. Presumably this would be for, I guess, capital planning, but the proposal here is just to delete it in an inactive committee. The school planning committee is inactive, and the town clerk recommended that it be deleted from the bylaw. Certainly doing plenty of school planning, just not taking place within the parameters of this committee. So that's that. Item 6 is to amend Section 2, Chapter 17 of the Town Code. This is something that was brought to my attention by Steve Venuti. Currently, the Director of Finance and Budget must also hold the title of Town Accountant and Treasurer Collector, and what we'd like to do is add the title of Assistant Town Administrator to that. I believe Bonnie had that title back in the day, but this just basically reflects that as another possibility within that. So, any questions on that?
No, we've talked about this. It's just another, once again, this was created before we had an assistant town administrator, so.
Okay. Yeah, and then just again, inserting Assistant Town Administrator to the list of roles eligible for the Director of Finance and Budget. Then we get to, I guess it's item 7, which is deleting the Youth Advisory Council. Again, another inactive committee that we're looking to move on from. Youth Advisory Council. Sorry. Yeah. So I think that was original. Yeah. So that was and that was the last of what we are requesting here. So again, Youth Advisory Council hasn't been active, and I think that is the correct. Yes, that's the last component here of this article that we would like to alter. So if there's not any other questions, we've amended it under the Town Administrator Search article to a supermajority, and I think just ask for your recommendation.
Any questions or comments?
Move the Select Board recommend Article 16, items 2 through 7.
Second.
By Mark, second by Matthew. Roll call vote. Matthew.
Matthews, yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Chuck.
Chuck goes back.
Karen.
Yes.
Yes. And I'm a yes. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, Article 17 is to rescind acceptance of state statute. So this is rescinds an article from 1959, which is refers to the wear of hay. We have had, what you typically see in an annual town meeting is the appointment of weighers of grain, hay, coal and livestock, fence viewer, and what's the other one, Mark?
Tree bark man.
Something like that. So,
Cattle driver.
field driver. Yes, field driver. Yes. Working with town council and trying to address that, because we don't want to have that be another article that we need to approve every year. Basically, by rescinding the wear of hay piece, along with basically an understanding of that those roles have essentially been transferred to other professional staff in the town, as opposed to appointing someone who oftentimes doesn't have any expertise in that particular area. So I think Joe Knox was asked a question one time, and he had some fun with it, but it's just not really,
Right.
It's just really not what we're doing anymore. So this is just another cleanup from that, and
And we always only have one member that puts in for it. It's just Mr. Fultz.
So anyway, that's basically why we're coming forward with that, and again, and the hope would be that for the annual, that you will not see this article before you again.
Any questions or comments?
So does this remove all of those, or just the wear?
It doesn't, just the weighers. Because I think what we would have to do otherwise is we would need a special act of the go to the legislature to actually take that away. City of Northampton did that, and so instead of having to put forward a lot of work, time for town council, we thought that let's get rid of the one piece which we know goes back to 1959, ask for that to be rescinded, and then it's a practical matter so that we can telegraph that so that people aren't disappointed when they come to annual town meeting and see that article missing, they'll know why.
Okay. Move the select board recommend Article 17.
Second.
Moved by Mark, seconded by Matthew. Roll call vote. Matthew.
Matthew, yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Chuck.
Goes aye.
Karen. And I'm a yes as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And that brings us to our last outstanding item, which is the purchase of the Webster property. So the proposal before the town is to appropriate funds of $1.6 million for the purchase of this parcel. We've done a little bit of research on this because I believe initially the CPC was proposing to fund the appraised amount for this, and one of the issues we ran into, at least we've been informed by town council, is that any amount it doesn't match essentially the appraised value cannot be funded through CPC. So under these circumstances, then the 1.6 million would then have to be funded entirely from by the town and without any guarantee of any grants, because we would have already had to go forward the funding on that front, or CPC funding on this. The town is essentially having to raise and appropriate and come up with this 1.6 million out of existing funds. So with that, Mr. Chair, I don't know, I'll turn it over to you. Let me know how you'd like to proceed.
Well, I guess it's a Conservation Commission's or article, so I don't know if you need, I guess you did speak at the last meeting. I wasn't there, but I did watch the meeting. I didn't know if there was anything further that your commission would like to add.
Sure. Chase Gerbig, co-chair of the Conservation Commission. So our original vote was to support bringing this forward to the town based on the $1.6 million. As we had discussed last Monday with your boards, we were looking into the CPC funding. That obviously has evaporated. That's not available. Where the Conservation Commission stands, we're in open session right now, and met before this meeting commenced, is we see a lot of conservation value to the land. We are not sure that, I don't think anyone here should take for granted that the proposed 66 unit development is a foregone conclusion as it's been put forward. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into what's been put forward for an appraisal versus what's permitted. And really where we're at right now is we struggle with the 1.6 million. I think we always have. We struggle now, especially given that there isn't CPC funding available to this. We also struggle with the fact that the purchase and sale has a 90-day due diligence period associated with it, and essentially the way the town council characterized that is town council doesn't see that as a bona fide offer because the purchaser could move out from underneath that. The Conservation Commission hasn't yet taken any votes. I think what we'd like to understand is where Select Board and FINCOM is with respect to funding this. If we're going to put forward the town should spend $1.6 million, we would need to understand now that the CPC thing is clarified, where that funding could come from or not come from, and frankly, what the opportunity costs are associated with that. So at this point, I think we'd really like to hear from FinCom, Select Board, your appetite for bringing this forward or not, and funding options.
That's not right. Okay, so Chase, just to be clear, so with the intention of revoting tonight on whether you want to keep the article on the warrant or withdraw it?
I think options are on the table, everything from stick with 1.6, a lower price, or withdraw it altogether. we're really open to a lot of different, I think, alternatives, and that's why we've stayed in open session, based on what we hear from you.
I'd like to definitely hear some of the finance committee's comments. This kind of got a crash course over the last couple days. I was out of town last week, and some of the new information with CPC, I was not aware that was something that we had to deal with, where any appraised property that the town is considering purchase of, we cannot go above that appraised value and still use CPC funding. I did request, just to let the boards know, I think everybody has this in front of them. I think it was provided. Did you get that document on? I had requested a couple of the last properties, the Williams and the Brown property in particular. I wanted to see what the appraised value was and what the town actually paid for those, and what that looked like, and how we were able to utilize CPC funds for that. One of the properties, in particular Brown property, appraised at $1.6 million for 23.67 acres, and we purchased it for $1.2 million, and so the town purchased it below the appraised value. The Williams property was a little bit more interesting. It appraised at $1,170,000. Appraisal basis was based on 26 lots and 5,000. If the roadway on the roadway came up through 32.25 acres. So the town bought 35.11 acres. The price was $1,273,758, which is above the appraised value, but the price over the appraisal was prorated based on buying the extra land. So that's how the town got around, and granted it was only 103,000 over basically, but this property is a little bit different. The appraisal of the property in hand was $630,000. The appraisal basis was on 66 affordable independent living units that could be on that property. The acreage is 36.49 that has been offered by the Websters, and the asking price is $1.6 million. The appraisal, in the notes, the appraisal considered property factors including area of steep slopes, wetlands, and perennial stream, and a vernal pool. Appraiser also considered development costs of road construction, wetland and stream crossing, permitting and engineering at a $1.125 million to $1.35 million range. Highest and best use was the 66 units at 50% affordable to tenants, earning a maximum of 60% AMI. So that's where we're at. That's where the appraisal came in, and unfortunately, our limitations now are whether we want to purchase the property outright, which is, I'm assuming the Finance Committee has ideas on what that would look like and where that funding source comes from. And I guess I would like to hear a little bit more about what that looks like, now that we know CPC is out of the picture. I mean, that's...
Thank you, Gary. I actually went back a little further than just the Brown and Williams property and looked at Cobb's Lane, which is back in 2010. We had an appraisal of $745,000, and we had a purchase of $745,000. So there hasn't been an instance where the town has paid in excess of the appraisal in any of our land purchases. This is almost 3 times the appraised value and the asking price. I'm glad to hear that the Conservation Commission is being a little flexible in their thought process. We also have concerns about the purchase and sale agreement. There's so many holes in that agreement, and as you mentioned, and in talking with staff here in town, it's not a slam dunk to get those permits to build these affordable units. it's going to be challenging to make sure that they get that special permit that's needed to build near the wetlands. In order to fund this, if it did go through for 1.6, we would have to borrow the funds. We don't have any funds available for this. Borrowing funds inside the town's coffers instead of using CPC, which we can't use for this, takes directly from the operating budget. So we're adding debt service to the town at the expense of something. We're talking about operating budget dollars here now. The extra revenue that the town gets each year with the 2.5% increase is not a lot of money. It's not. And we've been able to fund increases to the school department, salary increases, but the debt service on this, depending on how we structured the debt, could be anywhere from $200,000 to $250,000 in this first year. That's a large chunk to take out of the operating budget. If we were to keep it at the 630, we could use CPC funds. We have the money sitting in the open space budget right now to use it for cash. We wouldn't need to borrow anything. I think you can tell from where I stand with this purchase here, but I'll open it up to the rest of the committee.
I think what I'm hearing is that there is not a bona fide offer. If there's not an offer, I mean, I don't know, what do I know about real estate? But if there's not an actual offer, then the only thing on the table is the appraisal, isn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, do we have, I don't know, I'm a software engineer, I don't know about this, but if it's not a real offer, and, you know, if we think that all the things that they want to do are questionable, I think the only thing on the table is the appraisal, and that's 630, you know, 630. And, you know, if we were to put forward an article that said we're willing to put 630, which comes from CPC, great. I don't know that we can legitimately do something beyond that.
I don't think it's financially responsible for us to recommend something like that to town meeting where it's almost 3 times the appraised value.
Well, but the thing is, it's nothing. If it's not a real offer, it's
correct.
It's nothing.
It's kind of like the Red Sox bidding this up against themselves for free agents.
Okay, so
basically what it is.
you kind of glazed over quickly the discussion on not being a real offer. What did town council actually, I didn't get that information from town council.
Well, it's different information, right? We were told, I think the offer said that it was 18 houses, not the affordable. It also appeared that maybe it included the house and land, so there's questions as to what it's actually based on compared to what our appraisal is based on.
I apologize. I should have addressed those. So those 2 issues are being treated as editorial issues that would be corrected. Our understanding from the property owner is the reference to the 18 lots was simply incorrect. It should reference 66 units affordable housing, and that the house lot should be extracted from that. So we are talking about what we, I guess, thought we were talking about, which is 36.5 undeveloped acres for $1.6 million. I did focus on the 90-day due diligence period. That's what town council looked at, and I don't want to speak for town council. Ryan, maybe you had conversations with Tom, but really what it comes down to is in a right of first refusal context, the purchaser, the prospective purchaser, unless the town were to step in, has essentially made a guaranteed offer that that's what they're going to purchase it for without the due diligence period element of it. The fact of the matter is here that there's a 90-day due diligence period, and the purchaser could walk away from the deal. I think $20,000 deposit is what it would cost them. Not trivial money, but certainly small compared to the 1.6. And so that element of it, as you know, when we met with you last Monday, we had only had a limited amount of time to take a look at it. That came in from town council on Wednesday, right? Something like that. And so there is those two sort of Scrivener's errors, or that's how we're treating them, sort of set those aside.
What do you have, though? Do you have something for us that shows those errors?
Right now, what we would expect is that if we were to bring this forward, that those items would be corrected between now. Frankly, I'm speaking what we would expect, we would bring this forward, we would expect a revised purchase and sale that corrects those errors, or frankly, we would probably pull it from town meeting, unless those Scrivener's errors were addressed.
Thank you.
Any other comments, FinCom?
So I'm just curious, so the money that has gone from CPC into affordable housing trust, is this as affordable housing money, is that a potential funding source, or since its original source is CPC, the same?
I believe that the Affordable Housing Trust has to adhere to the CPC rules when we use that bucket of funding. So we have some funds in our piggy bank that are not CPC tagged, but most of it is.
But I think, Tyler, you're taking a look at what the developer has proposed for affordable housing. So we're not going to give them $630,000.
No, right. I'm just trying to think if it was a priority of the Affordable Housing Trust as well for these 66 units, you know.
But those 66 units aren't what the town will build.
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
We're not going.
it's on there, right?
Gotcha, okay. Thank you.
Right, this is an article from the Conservation Commission to preserve this as open space. And I would tell you that the Conservation Commission's argument might be that the development potential isn't always a good representation of what the conservation potential is. In other words, there could be value. In fact, that was the basis of the $1.6 million that we discussed previously. There can be value in paying above appraised price for conservation purposes because the conservation outcomes and goals that align with the town's expressed desire to conserve land could exceed the value associated with the development potential. But what we're looking for from you is, I think we're all circling around, how much is that?
What's the tolerance? What's the appetite?
Could I ask? Sorry. Go ahead.
No, okay,
I was going to ask the Conservation Commissioner or the conservation agent, do you have any idea why there's such a huge disparity between the appraisal and the offer?
No.
Okay.
I would tell you just from, I think the way that the $630,000 appraisal comes through, it's a yellow book appraisal, it's standard appraisal, it sometimes comes in a little bit low. It wouldn't shock me if there was another appraisal using an alternative accepted methodology that pushed this number up. I think no one expects that it would push it to 1.6 million. You know, if you told me our 630 was off by 10 or 20%, I wouldn't blush at all.
But the document we have here basically says the appraisal discounted the price by $1.1 to $1.3 million because of the cost of building the road. So if the road and the permitting, so if there's a way of doing that for, you know, let's just say it's $300,000 instead of 1.3, now we're up to the property's worth 1.6.
So and if it costs nothing, we...
No, I don't, no, I'm saying they picked a big number for this, and I'm pretty sure that that a developer can come up with a cheaper way of doing that. You can buy one of the adjacent lots and go through there without spending that much money.
But it's still a cost.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't
but
know,
it's
I don't know
not
how this
the same
is
cost.
relevant, I guess, to the discussion at hand, which is whether we pay.
So my original point was, if we're debating how, like, if we buy this, why would we spend 1.6? What I'm getting at is, why is the appraisal at 630, but a developer's offering 1.6? And Mark pointed out, it's because the appraisal discounted $1 million based on assumed infrastructure costs, right? So maybe it is worth 1.6. I mean, I understand that it's all like, it's all funny numbers.
I get what as a developer.
As a developer, yeah. right?
To be clear, those development costs would still need to be baked in if the developer were to buy the land for 1.6, right? There's, essentially, the property would have to be worth post-development sale price of $3 million to make this break even for the developer if those development costs are right. I should also note that the appraisal is built up based on multiple affordable unit developments in the greater Boston area. It essentially comes up with a per unit cost for those, adjusting those different units up or down based on a variety of factors. Some really simple and straightforward, like when it was built and adjusting it for time. Others are more judgment calls based on the difficulty of development. This property is very difficult to develop. There's no doubt.
Right, so going back to what I was trying to say here, by this discount, the appraisal actually values the land at 1.6. It values the development potential at 630 because it's going to cost $1 million to develop it.
I think it assigned the 630 based upon the town buying it, not developing it.
No, it wasn't, no, the 630 wasn't based on the town buying it. That was
Highest and best.
Highest and best
highest
use.
best use as a
630.
development.
Correct.
Not, but as Chase just pointed out, there can be a higher and best use as conservation.
So, I'll put you on the spot, Chase. What is it about this property that makes it worth $1.6 million in your point of view?
There are a couple factors. One, the size of the property is significant. Large parcels of land to preserve for conservation purposes are uniquely valuable. I think the way it works really is that two parcels that are half this size are not worth as much as one parcel of this size. And frankly, the opportunity to conserve large parcels of land is challenging and limited. So that in itself is an incredibly important component of this. Another component of it are, frankly, the pieces of it that are make it difficult to develop also represent the impacts associated with it, right? The interplay between the forest, the wetland areas, the streams, all of those are very integral to this. Another component of this, and you could accuse us of trying to have our cake and eat it too with this one, but is that it's in a portion of town where there isn't a lot of conservation land. Now, we acquired the Williams land because it's immediately adjacent to Newtown Hill. So there's a value in continuity, but there's also a value in conservation land that's represents other parts of town. And then, I'm not sure conservation is well qualified to speak to this, but there are cultural and historical significance components to this that are also, I think, factored in here in some way qualitatively. But the first three there, size, it's in a part of town, and it's an interesting and useful and diverse ecosystem. Those really fit together. And frankly, that's what we would look at really for any property.
And if this $1.6 million purchase and sale didn't exist, would you still be coming up with $1.6 million?
It's not necessarily a question just for you, it's for the commission.
Right, and that's what
It's actually not fair to ask you directly.
I'm not sure.
I've said all along, I think even as a resident, obviously as board members, we have fiscally responsible, we have other things that we have to consider. But as a resident, I believe every resident in town has a threshold for how valuable is a piece of land. I'm one of those people that looks at a piece of property, I could care less how many houses could go on it. I care more about what the value of the land is to me. I don't know what that is for everybody. Some may say it's $600,000. Some may say it's maybe a little more than that. And some may say it's 1.6. Some will say that there's no limit on how much we'll spend to buy the land. So I think everybody has a threshold on what that is. And so to ask you directly, I think it's probably not fair because I know how you vote on the commission might not be how you vote in public in the crowd.
And therein was my struggle. How I value it and how
I'm struggling with the same. Well, we think we all struggle with that.
So maybe we should allow the residents to vote on it.
Well, I'd like to hear Mr. Webster, because I know you had something to add. I spoke with Mr. Webster over the last few days kind of compressed to get some answers to some questions, because I'm trying to get my arms around this as well. So I wanted to give him the opportunity to speak, since it is his property.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you all. Appreciate all the hours that you have put in over weeks and weeks. I can assure you I have put in decades in this. So when it comes to me,
Just name and address so that for the records.
As you may see here, we own 25 and 33 Bulkley Road as it happens. My family, I am the youngest of 5, and the other 4 are 10 to 14 years older, so it comes to me with enough runway in front of me, my wife Gretchen and I, to buy out the other 4. So that's the modern day story. We have done that. The history, so what you should all know, what we're talking about, this is the Bulkley farm. Thomas Bulkley and henchmen from Chelmsford were the original landowners of the town of Littleton. So as cool as it is that my family is in its 2nd century of owning this property after 2 centuries of the Bulkleys owning it, the home, which we aren't talking about, is from 1700 along with all of the land. This is the original farm for town. This is what we're talking about preserving. Many of you have heard this many times from me, as cool as it is for me that my family has been here for 4 centuries, before any of the towns were named. Strong Bear and the Praying Neshoba were here for all the centuries before that, and this property also contains over a dozen ceremonial stone landscape sites, which have been verified by Dan Badillion, Jim and Mary Gage, and Strong Bear and Lynn himself and herself just last week. This is what we have the opportunity to preserve. Chuck, you asked when I was here last time, so the original meeting of the TDR, chaired by Matt and spoken to by Amy, for the Browns Woods property. $1 million acres, $1 million for 20 acres, $50,000 an acre. That's what I presented when I was originally here to the select board, because homes could be built. Homes in Littleton today, lots are $250,000 to $300,000. Chuck, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you were asking me when I was called up last week, but just round numbers, 10, 250 to 300, $2.5 to $3 million for development potential for that land. That's what I originally presented. Now we've gone through this entire exercise, and so that you know, bona fide, not bona fide, this purchase and sale was written by a real estate attorney practicing in our area with decades of experience. And yes, there were scrivener's errors because he had a family emergency that he was dealing with. Yes, we'll get it right. This is a for real offer for $1.6 million. So using the planning board's own written bylaws, 20 acres are necessary to build a 66-unit senior housing affordable development. The doorknob value for that senior housing development to a developer is $40,000. $40,000, 66 times is $2.64 million. So he's leaving himself $1 million to get through all of the planning board and permitting that he needs to do. Yes, it's a real offer. What matters to you tonight is that you know, as I understand, right of first refusal for the town. I believe the town would like the opportunity to say, with all the concentrated development downtown, we would also like to preserve some, as is in the master plan that we all voted in. I got to serve on the master plan implementation committee for 3 years. I believe in all of it. I believe we have an excellent plan. I believe with the development we're doing, we also need to conserve green space, and I'm offering the opportunity to conserve the original green space of this town. Yes, it is $1.6 million, and yes, it will be sold because Gretchen and Lyle will no longer have our own debt service for the carrying costs of this land. So it will either be sold to this town for conservation and preservation, or it will be sold to the developer. That is the fact of this meeting tonight. And so whether these people decide if it's on the warrant or whether the town decides, it will be sold. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask a question? Yeah, please. Lyle, I'm going to throw this out there just because we're referencing some stuff from the original and questions I asked. And you referenced 10 houses at 250 to 300 equals 2.5 to $3 million. What have you 66 units are going to be built in one portion, and I think it was laid out. I think, Chase, when you did your presentation, that was laid out. What was the speculation on how many single-family homes could be built in that development? You're referencing 10, but...
Right. So approaching my developer with that opportunity, this is a developer who has built communities in this town. He built Apple Dior, he built, I always get these names wrong, but up from Apple Dior, so the 40B development and the towers. He has experience with all of those things. After looking at all of it, rather than building individual luxury homes or cluster zone homes, the best turn of value for buying and developing is to use the senior housing bylaw for the 66 units. That is what generates the conceptual yield plan of what the best return is on this property.
Okay, so we shouldn't use the 10 homes at 250 or 300 then?
Right. Fair to ask. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
So where did the 18 homes come from that's in the purchase and sale if it's not the 10?
Scrivener's error.
Nothing to do with this
Copy and paste.
from another project?
My attorney was dealing with a family crisis, and he needed to get it out the door because we had promised it to Chase and the Conservation Commission. My apologies for any amount of circling, scurrying that any of you have had to do because of that. The offer's for 1.6. We will correct any Scrivener's errors.
Sure.
I'm just, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that the Apple Dior development was not without some serious, I don't think of the right word, challenges, hiccups, problems. Seeing some agreeing faces over there. And given that this development looks also to have some challenges, maybe it's unfair, but hearing that this is the developer that did Apple Dior does not increase my confidence. Perhaps that's unfair. But
I mean, at the end of the day, I think everything has pretty much been said. I don't want to steal more from people, but you have an appraisal that's not going to change. I believe you just basically said that this has to happen in November. It's not, there's no discussion to go out and get a second appraisal. This is where we're at. So we're as a group, $630,000 appraisal, $1.6 million asking price. I think Chase, please come on up. You spoke a little bit to some of the value of the land. I think Mr. Webster did too.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's clear. The seller has a perspective on the development potential. I think the town's perspective, working with the town's professional staff, conservation agents, with Amy, with Myron, we see probably 5 single-family homes, and there's a difference of technical opinion there about what could be built from a single-family home perspective. So, that's where there's.
So that's similar to the appraisal. One of the parts of that appraisal, I believe, showed that. Did they not?
It did, and it's in the appraisal, and I'm not sure, Ryan, if you've got a good way to pull this up, but there was a hand sketch in there that represented what Amy and Maren and Ryan worked with to sort of try and frame out what might be viable from a single-family home perspective. Ultimately, the appraisal went forward based on 66 units as a senior residential.
It's best use.
Yeah. But the challenge with that, and this speaks to the development potential of it, and every time I speak to this, I'm afraid I'm conceding that the development potential is the sole form of valuing it, but the development potential based on those is constrained by all the wetlands through the property. And I mentioned this last week, the 66 units, the way we got to that as being a viable starting point is something that might be permittable, because there are so many wetlands impacts, is that it would have to be deeply affordable. It would need significant waivers from the town to go forward, and one of those waivers would be predicated on it being in public interest. Otherwise, the extent of the wetland impacts would be significantly truncated. So difference of technical opinion on the number of single-family homes.
Approximately how much of the property is wetlands? What percent? Half? Two-thirds? One-third? Ballpark? It's also topography.
It's kind of hard to say because the wetlands kind of do this, but I believe 36 acres, I think at least half is wetland. And then whether or not you add on the 50-foot no disturb area, which is the wetland bylaw, it gets.
So if we treated it like any other development, it probably would be, after you do the buffers, it's probably 50, 55%, maybe 60% wetlands.
Yes.
Or protected area, which says that.
And that's been the difficulty.
Yeah, I mean, that's a guess, but it's in the 20 acre of the 36 acre range. It's never going to be developed anyway.
Yeah, so it's tough, and Brown's Woods definitely had a lot of wetlands, but they're over on the side, so they could do A&R lots, and Williams hardly had any wetlands on it, so.
Mr. Chair, and I'll bring this up, this was in the appraisal, I think you've all seen it, Fred.
I'm sorry, that sketch was done by a site civil engineer who's had, I don't know, 20, 30 years experience, and I asked him to ask what he thought he could do for single-family homes on there with septic and drainage and all the rest of it.
So if you just look at this chart for the Williams, Brown, and Webster property, the Williams property says 26 lots, appraised at 1.1 million, which works out to $45K per lot. The Browns Wood says 200, or 8 units at 1.6, so that's 200 per lot. So the per lot and development cost has nothing to do with, the only one that is, the appraisal is based on the development cost is this property. Or the other ones would be much more similar. I mean, property values didn't multiply by 4 in 3 years.
Mary?
Maureen Tupel, Town Planner. I suggest that it's the opposite. The A&R lots don't require significant infrastructure to develop it. That's why their development costs are very low. The development cost at Williams property was quite high because of the length of roadway that would have had to come in. So that was accounted for in both of those appraisals.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark. So I see our two boards as having, I see three options. One is that we do an article offering at the 6:30 with CPC funds. I think that's one thing we...
Well, let's be clear, that's Conservation Commission's article, only they can do that. Your board can... Well, you can amend it on the floor, someone can absolutely amend on the floor, but I'm just saying your recommendation is pretty cut and dry.
Okay, so I see three options for us.
Yeah.
Okay. One is go with the 6:30 and CPC money. That's one option. Another option is we put it on the warrant at the 1.6 and our boards all recommend it. Another option is we put it on the warrant at the 1.6 and our boards potentially recommend no. And I guess the fourth option is we put it on 1.6 and our board say that we're not making a recommendation. I think those are our options. I understand let's leave it up to the residents, the 200 people. I mean, let's be realistic, to 200 people rather than 20 or 30 here. But realistically, if our two boards, come on, at town meeting, if our two boards aren't enthusiastic about, an over $1 million purchase, it's going to be tough. But I think those are options.
So I don't think the 630 is an option because if we put it on for 630, why would Lyle accept it if he has a 1.6? So.
Okay. He already stated that's not an option.
Okay, all right.
So,
all right.
And I agree with you that it might be a tough sell for Lyle if to put it on if we don't recommend it, but that's his problem, not ours, right? I think we owe it up to the residents to put it on the warrant.
I don't want to talk in we again. So we're looking for a recommendation from FINCOM. Either you recommend the article or not, whether it's unanimous, but whatever that vote comes to be, but you're recommending to us, and we're counting on a recommendation from you. We do weigh that, believe it or not, heavily, so I think that's important to hear what your thoughts are. I mean, we've kind of got, I think, everything from the two groups. I don't know if CONSCOM's heard enough to think of anything else you can do to this article to make it any different. It sounds like it's not going to go to May. It's a special town meeting article, so we're looking for a recommendation from FINCOM if that's the case, and then we are either going to, we have two options, really. We have recommendation to withdraw the article from the warrant. We don't want to push it through the town meeting.
But isn't it their article to push?
They recommend that we put it on the
We can take it off the warrant.
Thank you.
Or we push it through the town meeting, we vote to push it through the town meeting, and it goes to the floor for a 2/3 vote.
With our recommendation or not.
Whether yes. So we have a couple.
So I have an opinion on this. I think Finance Committee, at least, at a minimum, owes it to the town to recommend or not recommend a financial article, and not go to town meeting and saying, yeah, we're going to leave it up to you. I would be appalled if I was sitting out in the audience and I heard that from our Finance Committee.
And the first question would be, what's your recommendation?
Absolutely.
I get that.
And Chase, I didn't mean to put you on the spot when I asked that question before. I had a reason I was asking that question. You can't put a value on this. You can't say that this property is worth this amount of money and this property, because they're all different. They all have different components. They're all made up of different wetlands, different things going on in those parcels. All we have to go through in all these sales that we've done in the past, since 2010, is the appraised value. And we can't, I don't want to speak for the Finance Committee, but I would have a hard time standing in front of town meeting and saying, we have an appraisal of $630,000, but we're asking you to spend $1.6 million on that parcel. I would have a hard time financially saying that to the town. I would think that you guys do too. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is a tough one.
Mr. Chair, I think Karen has her hand.
Oh, Karen, please. Sorry.
So the audio was a little spotty, and I just was hoping that Steve could recap real quick what the debt service would look like if the purchase was made for 1.6.
It depends how long we would borrow for. So if we're doing a 10-year borrowing, it's probably in the range of $250,000 in the first year, and it decreases after that. If it's a 20-year borrowing, we're probably looking around 180 to 200 or so, depending on what happens with interest rates.
Can I ask a question? I don't know if this is Marn, Amy, or Chase, but this is a appraisal based on development potential. Can we get an appraisal just based on land value that's not on development potential? Is there such a thing?
It's conceivably possible, but I don't think...
They have to appraise it.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, the timeline is a real challenge.
Can I speak to that a little bit?
Brian can speak to this.
And I'll look to Maren for this, but basically, this idea of changeability from looking from one appraiser to the next, there are set rules, and the rules are based on highest and best use. So, I mean, so when we looked at any of the, well, I mean, these are the rules that the appraisers are working under, and under that goal. So it is the basis for which we as a town then have to look at and establish what that value is. Just as we have with those other parcels that we get handed out the history on. That's the standard.
So my question is, the assumption is that high and best use is based on it being developed, right? Is that always the case?
That's all you have to go by.
I'll say, I mean, that was that was the case for Browns Woods, that was the case for the Williams land. The context that I gave you was obviously the town purchased those properties at certain valuations per acre with the purposes of conserving them, right? So that the town was supplanting their conservation value on top of the development value, but it's always been based on development potential.
But the amount per acre between one purchase and another purchase, you can't make that correlation because it's based on an appraisal for the highest and best use of that property. And that's the development of that property. So if this property is more developable than another property, of course, the cost per acre is going to be higher. There's no comparison between them.
Well, otherwise we'd be comparing it to the Lapoli property. They're about the same size.
Exactly.
35
But
million.
my counterpoint to that, Steve, is that there isn't a market for conservation land in Littleton except, frankly, for the town. So there is no market for that to value it against.
So-
And we're probably saying the same thing here, but it really, I'm in part trying to make sure it's clear that setting this aside, I think there are opportunities and potential, and maybe now I'm speaking a little bit individually than on behalf of the Conservation Commission. There are certainly scenarios where the value to the town for conservation land can very realistically exceed the development potential. Now, here, does it exceed by $970,000? I think that's the challenge. If this was $800,000, that, I think you would find maybe a very different
No, so
level.
let's go on what you basically just said. There are opportunities that possibly could be land purchases down the road where the appraisal comes in and we see a benefit of keeping that. We pay a premium to keep that open space, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Which means that we would never use that open space bucket in our CPC. We could never use that. If we always say that we're going to pay a premium on these parcels because we really like them, and we're going to do it over the appraised value, we will never hit that bucket. Never. Why put money in there? We would never hit that bucket. We cannot use CPC dollars over the appraised value. If you put a premium over the appraised value, then we're taking CPC off the table. That's the law.
Yes, Ed Foltz, and I'm speaking for myself, not as a commission member. You're right, that if we always did that, but we don't always do that, and we try very hard not to. I struggled with this property personally because of the disparity from the purchase, whatever.
PNS.
PNS, thank you, and the appraisal. But I also look at it as we're developing this town like there's no tomorrow. The planning board has got a blank check to every developer in town. This is an opportunity for us, for us to at least give the town the opportunity to decide that they might want to protect this land. You know, and the things that Lyle mentioned, the Indian spots and the wetlands certainly have a lot of creatures and animals that live in the wetlands. So if we put it on the floor and let the people in town decide, then they'll decide, yes, we're willing to spend $1.6 million to protect this land. And oh, by the way, it's in a spot that's got no open space or very little open space. And oh, by the way, we're developing the devil out of the town and we don't want to keep doing that. So we've got to make a stand somewhere. I wish we were under the appraised or at the appraised value. I truly do. As Chase had said, you know, he struggles. I struggle personally with the disparity. But my fear is that people are going to look and say, "Oh my God, 66 senior citizen housing. We really need senior citizen housing. So don't buy it. So this guy will develop it." And whether he'll be able to or not is debatable. Planning board doesn't see a permit they don't like. You know, other places may or may not give the permits, but you can't assume that this developer isn't going to find a way to do the development. He wouldn't have made the offer if he didn't think he could do it, even with the 90-day out. You know, so that's my opinion on this. When it comes to town meeting, I'll have to personally decide, do I vote yes or no? But as a committee, this is one of the things we've struggled with. Do we offer it to the town and give them the opportunity to decide, or we just take it off the table altogether and don't even give it to them to even think about it? So,
I'm not going to take public comment on this. I only let Mr. Webster speak, obviously, because he's the landowner, so
well, I
please speak for
apologize.
the,
You got it anyway.
please speak for the commission. That's all.
So, I think FINCOM is ready probably to make a motion, but what I would ask is, if we make a motion not to recommend, I would actually ask that the select board still put it on the warrant and let it go to town meeting, let the residents make a decision, but with what I expect is going to be a nay recommendation from FINCOM.
Well, I guess I would say that it's great to be on the finance committee and be able to say that, because we have to make the decision over here as the gatekeepers on whether to put it on the warrant or not. And that's another level of decision that this board has to make. And
That's where you.
I understand what you're saying, but right.
And exactly what Fred said.
So I think it's,
That's why you guys are elected, to make those decisions.
So I want a recommendation from you, I truly do, and I want to make sure that your board hasn't heard enough this evening where you need to reconvene and re-vote, because you were unanimous with the $1.6 million purchase in your previous meeting before the CPC discussion, and if that's still the case, we do need to know that. So I don't know if you need to just discuss.
Yeah, if it's okay with you, we may take our leave for a few minutes and discuss this, so you can sort
We
this
can
out.
argue
Is that okay?
amongst ourselves, yeah.
All right, thank you.
So I also think,
I mean, to be clear, that is a public meeting that's going to happen out there, so.
You're in a public space.
I also think we can get creative. I mean, you can leave, Chase, so I can vote. I mean, we can get.
You answer it however you want to.
I still think we can be creative on the CPC funding, right? We say this whole property is valued at $630, but I bet if we did another appraisal and said, this is the area that was going to be developed, appraise that, right? And get a CPC for that small portion. If we are only saying that a small portion is developable of this whole thing, we can subdivide it however we want and fund it.
But I don't think there's time.
Can't do that.
You don't have-
It's deeded.
No, you
It's deeded contiguous.
You
You
don't
can't
have
do it.
time
Mass
to do
General Law, Chapter 41, why you do that?
How
It's
are we?
deeded contiguous. You can't do it.
How do we do that with an A&R? With the planning board's doing that with their A&R for the other
This isn't
one.
an A&R.
So
Look, I wish we had the time. I wish we had till.
I think we have more time, right? There's a separating the funding versus voting on it. We don't have to figure it out immediately.
If it doesn't go to this town meeting, then it's in May.
Yes.
Mr. Webster, can you wait till May?
No. What we vote today doesn't say how we fund it today, right? We say raise, appropriate, borrow.
Finance committee pretty much told us how we have
figure out the
to,
funding
how it's going to be
after
funded. We have to borrow. We have to
Or
borrow.
we assume it's going to be borrowing, yeah,
And
maybe
there's-
we can get creative.
And I understand,
And we can't change, if we decide to go to town meeting and it passes, we do it as a raise and appropriate or a borrowing article, and we can't then change and say, well, we're gonna separate this part of the land and we can use CPC. We can't do that.
Can't do that.
Because it's illegal.
What part's
We have to go to town
It's
meeting
against
to ask
Mass
for
General
the
Law. We
CPC
just
funds.
can't do it.
To subdivide a lot?
No, we'd have
It's
to.
already been funded. We've gone to town meeting, we've asked the residents, we've asked the members of town meeting to vote on something.
Right.
And then we're moving the uprights and we're saying, yeah, but we're gonna move
No,
this
but
aside. we're
CPC
gonna pay for it
voted,
differently.
CPC at their last meeting voted to fund it, right? We didn't put it on because we
They
didn't
voted to
think they
fund- They
could.
voted to fund the whole thing.
Yes, so we can put that back on.
Can't.
Why can't we put that on?
Because it's
I'm not gonna get into
illegal.
the argument.
No,
Can't.
it's illegal to fund it as it's currently constructed.
Right.
Yes, but we don't,
You can't, if we vote,
You have to vote on what you have in front of you today.
and you can't change,
You can't
we can't, Amy can't give us a grant, Amy can't apply for a grant after the fact and we decide to borrow. Let's say we decide to borrow,
Amy was talking about applying for a grant at the last meeting.
But you can't.
if
You
it went to
can't
May, the
apply to
possibility
this
would be there.
because
We
we've
can't-
already purchased it.
But we
can't apply something after the fact.
were just talking at our last meeting that Amy was going to apply for a grant for this property. with it being on the warrant now, are we saying that Amy can't apply for a grant because we're moving forward?
Exactly.
Yes.
Because that wasn't what was presented last week.
I think she was under the impression that this could go to May, in which case she could use.
Why would she be under that impression? We were
all
discussing
kind of-
whether the
there was a
article
lot
was
of-
on.
There was a lot of discussion.
You can't apply for a grant
You
after
can't use
the
multiple
fact.
Grants.
Period.
Let's talk,
Can't use
I mean, let's stick with the fiscal piece to it. So the 1.6, about 200 to 250,000 a year.
It's 20 year.
For 10
Right, and if
years.
it's a 10 or 20 years, so.
And Steve, you said it had to come out of the operational budget, but why can't it come out of the capital? It's just one bucket or the other, right?
Well, it's after the fact.
Debt service, it's in the operating budget.
So it takes away from operational hires, and that part concerns me, obviously, the first part of this, the first few years, enormously. Later on, maybe we have a little more flexibilities with the Lapoli property coming online and things like that, but that's to 2030 plan. Right now,
There's so many
it's
other things
really
that we
tight.
can do with $1.6 billion over the next 10 years.
This is tough.
Yeah, James mentioned opportunity cost, but there's other opportunity costs, and we have to.
Absolutely. What things can we do? We're talking about funding police, fire, extra
We
bodies.
have all the CBAs.
This is
coming
going to
up, right?
impact it. We're talking about a potential big impact for the school system next year. This is going to impact it.
Could we hear what's special about the land? Can you tell us about, I don't know, spotted salamanders or bobcats or cultural things that prove that this land is meaningful in a way that 550 King Street doesn't have the same, bite?
I kind of, and maybe I'll ask Amy to touch on some of the elements that she's put into some of the grant applications that we've put forward. I think, and following this, we can certainly, I know it's not contemporaneous, but make sure you have copies of that, because that's going to do a better job. But Amy, do you want to speak to the content of some of the grant applications?
Sure, and the grant applications do not get put in because of the difference in the price between the appraisal. So generally speaking, this was scoring higher. It's got all of the wetlands on it. It's got a perennial stream on it, and it's got intermittent streams on it. It has a vernal pool, and we did not find endangered species, but we only had a brief window in April to look at what was in there. There's clearly deer using it, presumably from the trail cameras that are in the area. There's probably bobcat, maybe bear in the area. And while those will certainly go through your backyard, they need big pieces of land to den in or to hang out in otherwise. And on the Native American, the ceremonial stone landscape piece of it, there's been a fairly detailed survey done out there. And some of the ceremonial stone piles are really big. And I'm no expert, but they are pretty big. And there's certainly stone walls. There's a spring out there, which I believe had been used historically for the farmhouse, and it was piped actually to the farmhouse from there. There's a nice emergent marsh in the center, very wet, and the rest of the wetlands are mostly wooded. And there's a really nice steep upland tree slope up to Sanctuary 300 Foster, which has very nice mature trees on it. So it's a nice diversity in there. And it is just barely connected to the Boxborough Wildlife Management Area, which people can't get to because it's cut off by the train and Route 2. So it does provide a corridor through to other open areas, open space areas, which don't have trails because they're cut off.
But at least, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least some of that, and maybe half of that, would be untouchable anyway.
Exactly, but it's for the conservation value, if you start covering it up either into single-family homes or one big 66 unit with the lights and the people out there, the wildlife is not going to have their habitat. The smaller stuff definitely, your raccoons and possums will still have no problem there, but the bigger stuff is not going to find a place. And for better or worse, the Native American artifacts aren't protected by state regulation.
Right.
For a private property.
Thank you. Mr. Gerby.
We've chosen to make your life difficult. The Conservation Commission voted 6-0 to recommend to the Select Board to put this on the town meeting up to, and that would require modifying the language here, up to 1.6 million. And would subsequently close their meeting.
Financial standpoint.
They said they're no.
You're no longer in session. All right, thank you.
One more question. Would it be possible if, in fact, we voted for the 2/3 here for the 1.6, excuse me, that grants could thereafter be funded to help offset the cost of...
Once you have bought the property, you can't get a grant.
Okay.
And if you did go for a grant before you actually paid for it, the state federal grants would only go to the appraised value. So it would be a certain percentage of the 630.
And Mr. Chair, point of clarification, Jenna, the 2/3 vote is a 2/3 vote at town meeting because it's a debt. For a debt issue. Right.
And again, we haven't heard much from your table tonight. Please speak up. The kids' table.
For me, I think I see value in the land. I appreciate what Lyle had to say about it, which, and what conservation has to say about it, that it might be desirable. But from a financial perspective, I can't recommend as a financial advisor that this is the price based on the purchase and sale. It may get corrected between now and then, but it still doesn't seem like it's a slam dunk that it's going to go through and be developed. So I still, even with that, might have a hard time saying that it's worth spending that kind of money on.
I think I'm kind of in the same place, right? I think we're trying to find extra money to fund CPC to get the match for things like this, right? So I think, it makes it even harder if we do this to find additional money for CPC. It also sets a difficult precedent with paying above appraisal value and not being able to leverage that money. So those are kind of the two things I'm just as far as.
My feeling is that we have 13 years of history that says that we really haven't paid more than appraised value. And I think there's enough unbuildable land on this property that we get some benefit anyway if the town decides not to do it. But my personal feeling is, strictly from a financial standpoint, I personally would not recommend spending an extra $1 million over appraised value for this property, strictly from a financial standpoint. Emotional, conservation, whatever, let the town decide, but from a financial standpoint, I would not recommend it go forward.
Jenna?
I think that we are at a time in our history where land is becoming less and less available for living things other than humans, and at the same time, affordable housing is something we deeply need. So I might abstain from voting because I'm split really between, the idea of conserving land and making sure that affordable housing is available. And I know that that's not a slam dunk, but I agree that if we have 13 years of paying for what's for what professionals have priced it at, that diverging from that financially, as Fred said, is not in keeping with what the Financial Committee has done in the past. And personally, I do think land is important, and as I think you all know, I think we're running out of time to do good things. So I'm really split.
I certainly don't claim to be a conservation expert. That's what we have a commission for. We deal with the finances of the town.
Right.
And from a financial standpoint, this does not make any sense to me whatsoever to go this far over the appraisal when we're setting a precedent for future lots that come up. if we were to rank lots in this town, I'm sure this isn't number one up on top of the list for these folks. I know they're holding that stuff close to the vest, and they won't divulge it, but this is not property number one. What happens when property number one does come up? That's the stuff that we need to plan for and be ready for when we do have to pay all the appraisal, because there will be times when we're going to look at a premium. This is not the time. I can't wrap my hands around this one.
So let's do a motion.
Let's take a vote. Have a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion that the Finance Committee does not recommend financing this at $1.6 million.
Have a motion and a second. Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm opposed.
5-1.
And I still think y'all should put it on.
So I want to speak to that. Actually,
Yeah, that's our time.
I'm really glad you voted that way. I think that's the right thing to do, and I think it's what you should have done. I'm glad CONSCOM voted the way they did. I think that's what they should have done. I think the struggle we're having here is that, you know, someone said everyone has to decide whether this conservation value is $1 million, in essence. And I don't even know where I stand on that. I think it probably isn't worth $1 million to me, but it's close. And I think we ought to not recommend it, or we should take no stance on it and put it on the warrant and allow the town to decide and lay it out. Say, FINCOM says we should not do this because it's not fiscally responsible. We believe there's a lot of value in the conservation. We're not sure if the value reaches 1.6 million, and that's why the town votes on it. It's your decision whether you, as a body, feel that it's worth this. That's what I think we should do.
Can I comment to that? I totally get your point of view, Matthew. That's fine. I think that the select board, as an elected official of this town, needs to make their opinion known to town meeting. You can't go to town meeting and my opinion again, can't go to town meeting and say, we're up in the air, we want to leave this to the voters to decide. If you're for it, say you're for it. If you're against it, don't even put it on the warrant.
There's a third option. They can put it on the warrant and say that they don't recommend it, but they're deferring to the town. I think that satisfies both points of view. It informs the town as to the feeling of your board, if that is the feeling of the board, but it still leaves it up to the town. I think take a recommendation either way, and you've told the town what you feel, just as we've told the town what we feel, but I still think, in fairness, let the town decide at town meeting.
All right, we're going to let's keep it to our board. Karen, I'd like to hear you speak.
I guess I was just going to say, I thought there was a precedent for not voting on issues like, that are this contentious, and I think that was set during, or at least, if not set, then, it happened recently where the select board didn't vote on the gun.
It's zoning. We don't vote on zoning. It's like we're not voting on the Long property on Foster. We don't.
You may have taken a vote on that.
No, we did not
vote on the MBTA.
No.
So I think these type of articles, where they're borrowing articles, we kind of are considered the gatekeepers to put these on the warrant, right? That's all. So I know what you're saying, but that's why we're here, and this is a tough one. I think it's obviously tough on everybody in the room, and it just, as it rises to the top, it's even more tough on the five of us. But I mean, I'm asking for a vote tonight on this. I think it's important that we come up with a decision collectively as a board, and we live with whatever that is. So that's my opinion, but that's why we vote on on the finance, any type of borrowing or finance articles. And that's every finance article, correct? I want to make sure I'm not speaking. Okay.
Yep.
Sure, I respect that, and it makes sense. As a resident who was sitting in the gym during that discussion, I would say that, for all intents and purposes, substantively, it's a distinction without a difference for a lot of folks. So, I think it's interesting that, it seems like no matter which side you fall on, you are putting your faith in the experts in some regard and then questioning the experts in another regard. And I'm tempted to do the same. I don't think the appraisal, it just does not make sense. We keep saying we've never paid over appraisal, which is true, but we've also never paid under $40,000 an acre. So in at least, in the 3 properties that we're looking at here. So, I just don't think that $600,000 is credible. But I recognize that there's an inherent irony in saying that, well, I question the appraiser, but I believe, I am accepting wholeheartedly the Conservation Commission's decision and, Amy's opinion that this is unique land in terms of its conservation value.
I will happily vote on a recommendation. Like, if we take it, I probably will recommend that we support it.
I'm going to look for a motion.
If
we still have discussion, we still have deliberation, sure, certainly. Still discussion.
I think we should, I definitely think we need to put it on the warrant, and I support it as well. So I've walked the property. It's a nice piece of property, right? I wouldn't call it the crown jewel of Littleton, right? It's not the prettiest property I've walked, but it is a nice property to walk, right? It is wet. It is not wet enough that compared to a lot of the properties like the town forest where it needs boardwalks everywhere to get through. It's not that wet. Compared to the town forest, it's bone dry. I do think we owe it to the residents to put it on the warrant and allow them to vote. And if they, go against the finance recommendations, or we have to be creative on how we figure out what we're going to, the trade-offs, so.
Yeah, obviously I put a lot of faith and credence in the Finance Committee. To Steve's point, or Fred's point, Steve, I think you said that, CONSCOM is charged with advocating for conservation. FINCOM is charged with advising us in all things budgetary and finance. And I put a lot of weight in that. And even before they voted, from a fiscally conservative perspective, I did not think, Steve said it best when he said it's not financially responsible to incur this kind of debt. And if we were to incur it, the fact that it's coming out of our, because it's debt service, automatically comes out of operational budget. There's so much we're trying to, we're looking at $5,000 or $6,000 here or there that we're trying to make work so that we can balance a budget or make programs happen. And I just think that at 630, there's no question. And especially because we can use the CPC funding, I think that's a no-brainer. I absolutely appreciate the value of the land, but Chase, you and I spoke after the last meeting, and we both kind of agreed that from 6 to 1.6 is just a really, really tough pill to swallow, and I think that we would be remiss, or we would be outside the lines, I think, in not doing our job as select board members if we recommended that we purchase this land for $1.6 million. We've got 3 things that we're responsible for. One of them is personnel. We've got 3 people that report to us. One of them is policy, and the big weight that we lift is the budget. And this is not in line with what we're supposed to do with the budget. And we've had our experts opine on it, and I just, if the board decides to move forward and go with it at push it forward to town meeting. It sounds like that's the way it's going. And 3 of my colleagues have expressed an interest in doing that. So be it. It will go to town meeting, and I certainly value the opinion of the residents, but at some point, we have to make tough decisions, and we have to, Brian, you alluded to it earlier, we're going to let 200 people who are showing up at town meeting decide the fate, and that's what we do. That's our form of government, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I mean, it's great, and it's a double-edged sword. Double-edged sword. Yeah, but it's not always as productive, I guess, or not always. We don't always get the best results through this process, but it's the process that we follow, and we have to live with it.
It's the worst form of government except for all the other forms of government. Winston Churchill.
I mean, all the points that were made are valid points. If there's a development put on it, Fred, to your point, and then the rest of the land is conserved but not conserved, there's land available, and Mr. Webster gets his asking price of 1.6. The rest of the land is conserved because they're not going to build on that. But to Amy's point, a third of the property or 2/3 of the property is not necessarily the right habitat for some of the species that are calling this property home. So I agree with everything that's been said. I appreciate all the thought and input that everybody's put into it. But as a member of the select board, and with budget being one of our primary responsibilities, I can't in good conscience vote to recommend this to town meeting. In fact, I would probably, if I thought I had the support, I'd recommend that we withdraw the article.
So this is one of those emotional articles versus fiscally responsible articles as far as splitting me down the middle. So I'm going to look at, this is an area that I grew up in. I live a quarter mile, if that, a couple hundred yards from it. I've known the Websters a long time, but I have to look at the fiscal responsibility that we have coming up, cutting my teeth on the finance committee, as what this $1.6 million means to Littleton's future in regards to so many things, even in regards to, we've been asking you to come up with the ways to finance a percentage point of CPC. Well, I'm looking at $250,000 right here a year that we could be, why are we putting it into the CPC bucket or helping that? I'm looking at 4 contracts that are coming up this year: school, fire, DPW, and police.
Dispatch, too.
And dispatch, excuse me. And I'm looking at the needs that I already know are on the table, operational needs, and unfortunately this comes out of an operational budget, that they're right in front of us right now. And that's what's pulling me to my fiscally responsible side of, I can't in good conscience recommend it. So that's wrong. It sounds like we have the votes. If the 3 of you are going the other way to put this through, but I'm not sure. I want to hear it. But that's where I stand, and it has not been an easy decision for any of us. But I want open space as much as everybody, and I wish we had another source. Yeah. I wish we had another fund. Well, we're not talking CPC. We're just talking. We have a land use fund that we've created this bucket because this is going to keep happening to us. And I'll say the properties. I'll say the Mish land. I wish we had it for Durkee. I wish we had it for Cooper. Durkee was one of the most beautiful properties in the town. This happened. So we can go down the list.
Yeah, Jones Meadow. There's plenty, yeah.
And until we do something, these are the type of decisions that board members here, long after we're done, have to keep making until we make a commitment.
So to that point, and I'll be very brief, I'm keenly aware of the operational difficulties. We went through the budget process. We said no to people. It's terrible. I hate it. Yeah. I hate not having enough money. We can hire a police officer in 2025, but we can't buy this land in 2025 if it's developed. We got one shot at it, and they're not making any more land. So that's one of the reasons why, as difficult as it is, and everything you said about our priorities is right, Chuck. I still think that we have a crack at a big chunk of undeveloped land in town that we should protect. I think it's one of the things that we have not done a great job of.
That's 3 times the appraised value.
Again, we can get into all that, like, I think there's arguments on both sides of the appraised value. I think Karen said it best. We've never bought anything for under $40,000 an acre. So that's 1.6 at $40,000 an acre.
All right, let's
Okay,
I'm going to look for
I'm
a
done.
motion. I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion, the select board put Article 20 on the warrant.
A second.
As amended. We do have an amendment on the floor, correct?
As amended.
Well, so are we recommending it, or are we just putting it on?
I'm just putting it on the
Okay,
warrant.
very good. Okay, I'll second it.
What's the?
It's already on the warrant.
To include,
Excuse me.
I did second.
I wanted to, it's currently on the warrant.
Yeah, I mean, unless you take an exception, if you said that you want it off, I mean.
Right, that's when we would vote.
Okay.
So it's
already
you're
presumably
voting
on.
to recommend the.
Okay, I thought we had to do both, so.
Right, because it was, I forgot we voted to put it on the warrant already.
Okay, then I'll make a motion that we recommend Article 20 as amended.
And then before we get a second, I do want to hear Jason.
I just wanted to make sure we covered, the language up there says explicitly to borrow 1.6.
up to.
Up to.
And it should be amended, okay. I just wanted to-
All right, so can you please add that as amended?
Yeah, I make a motion, the select board recommend Article 20 as amended.
I second.
It's been moved by Mark to recommend Article 20, seconded by Matthew. We have a roll call vote. Matthew?
Matthews, yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chuck?
No.
Gary? The no. Karen?
Yes.
Yes. So the movement passes. It will go to the town meeting on the warrant with a recommendation from the select board and a non-recommendation from the finance committee.
And your recommendation will indicate the split vote?
It usually does.
Yeah, 3-2 vote.
Yeah.
It should.
Yeah.
Yeah, it usually says we
That's-
recommended
yeah.
by 3-2, yeah.
Fine.
And Conservation Commission's endorsement, will that just be part of the record at town meeting?
It's their article, so if they had the decision today to make whether they wanted it either changed, reworded, or pulled. And they wanted to keep it, so they are unanimously behind the article.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Brian, do we have any other business this evening?
Well, only to affirm your earlier votes, so.
Thank you,
just made the
CPC,
article.
excuse me. Thank you, CPC, Conservation.
Everybody, really, yeah.
Mr. Webster, thank you. And Maren, thank you. Thank you. Have a good night.
So just to formalize the votes you've taken here, just ask for a motion on the recommendation of Articles 1 through 20, some of which you have not voted on, but for the recommendations you made this evening.
I'm confused, what do we actually?
You could probably amend it, so say, move that the select board vote to recommend articles recommended on the evening of tonight.
26th.
26th, thank you. September 26th, it's been a long night. Special town meeting dated September 2023.
So moved.
With amendments.
Wait,
As amended.
So is the planning board motion on there? Because we don't.
No, that's it. That's why, because it was
Okay.
1 through 20, so
All
we're
right.
not making recommendations on that. That's
Second.
yes.
It's been moved by Mark, seconded by Chuck. Roll call vote. All those in favor, Matthew?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chuck?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well.
Okay, and I think and the last motion is to, although I don't, this was not included, but to post the warrant. That just formal, there's 2 documents. There's the town meeting report, which is what everybody receives in the mail, as well as the motions that are then posted at the various public locations in town. So the motion there would be the select board vote to recommend posting of the November 1, 2023 special town meeting warrant.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Mark, seconded by Matthew. Roll call vote. Matthew?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chuck?
Chuck's aye.
Karen?
I've got to abstain, I didn't hear a word of that.
To
post.
It's just to post the warrant.
Just to post the warrant.
Aye.
And
Change my vote, aye.
I'm an aye as well. Thank you. Unanimous.
And that is it.
I I'm going to look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Chuck, seconded by Mark. Roll call vote. Matthew.
Matthew is an enthusiastic aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Chuck. Karen.
Aye.
Thank you. Have a good night, Karen, and I'm an aye as well.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your
Thank you.
patience with this.
That's what-
Thanks, Karen.